And as promised, the Big Times Now exclusive today was a big day in court for the NewsClick story after the August 5 publication by New York Times reiterated how organizations like NewsClick are being funded by people linked to the Chinese government. Today, the ED moved the Delhi High Court seeking that the stay on coercive action against NewsClick and its promoter be vacated. The agency said that this is a case of criminal conspiracy to bring in unaccounted money from abroad and that they had fresh material to show that money laundering has been done by NewsClick. While issuing notice to both, the court also said that contentions raised by the ED have merit and require more deliberation. The matter will now be heard next on September 6, but it's key now that the agency says that fresh material shows scheduled offences and money laundering have been committed. Remember, all of this week, Times Now has exposed to you how a mail trail showed how NewsClick was actively involved in not just engaging in Chinese propaganda, but also advancing China's interests while its promoters lived in India and claimed that they are independent journalists. Today, we get you a fresh set of emails between NewsClick promoter Prabir Purkayastha and his associates. This one is about making a documentary on China's maritime route. It's essentially saying that global maritime trade needs to be reconfigured in favor of China. So what were they doing? They were corresponding, talking about, we'll make a documentary. In this documentary, we will talk about how the global maritime trade, basically the trade at sea, it needs to be reconfigured. The gist of the mail is that they say, oh, you know, right now America dominates global maritime trade. That needs to be changed. So let's make a documentary and we will show how this trade instead should go to China. And remember, this documentary is being made by independent journalists who are based in India, wanting to give preponderance to Chinese interests. Let's take you through the entire mail trail in possession of Times Now. The first email goes from Prabir Purkayastha to Shastri Ramachandran. It is dated June 10, 2016. Here Prabir Purkayastha says, in touch with former naval commander talking about doing a documentary. He goes on to say the documentary on China's land and maritime Silk Route, what is global maritime trade and reconfiguration of global trade. Pay close attention to what is being said. Let's go back to that last line, the one earlier. The earlier line, how it speaks about global trade needs to be reconfigured. Let's stay here. What does it say? What is global maritime trade and reconfiguration of the global trade? Which means right now, America is dominant. We need to make a documentary about how it needs to be reconfigured. You staying in India, you would want the documentary to say, oh, you know, the trade needs to be in favor of India. Let's see what this reconfiguration is actually about. Moving on. Now, this email says, long-term change from ocean powers to Asian landmass becoming economic center. Asian landmass becoming economic center. Now, let's think, which is the other Asian landmass other than China who could become the economic center for maritime trade? India? Well, this documentary certainly is not talking about India becoming the Asian landmass, which can be the economic center. What is this documentary talking about? Well, they say land empires fell with the rise of ocean-based empires, and hence 90% of global trade controlled by West, one of their sources of economic power. Further goes on to say that essentially now we have to say that these are Chinese traditional global routes. If somebody in the Asian landmass has to become powerful, we are making this documentary to say China perhaps needs to become that Asian center of economic power by virtue of its traditional trade routes at sea. Next, Prabir Purkayastha says to a former naval commander on the 23rd of June 2016, this is the response from Chinese side. I think it is very positive. He has communicated with Chinese people. He says we can create maps and infographics on it. And finally, he says that copying my friend Shastri here, as he would have better feel of the Chinese on this. You've read the entire mail trail. Now let's tell you what it actually means. Let's simplify this entire communication for 2016. Essentially, what Prabir Purkayastha, let's play out for our viewers, what do these emails basically tell us? What do they mean? It says that NewsClick published a docu-series on China. Why did they make this entire docu-series? The aim is to project China's maritime supremacy. They are saying that China must be branded as the ocean power dominating the world. And China must be projected as a nation influencing maritime connectivity. You are essentially playing the role of propagandist. You're making a documentary, but you are saying that land empires are now passé. Anyone who rules the waves, as it were. The maritime trade is going to be the next superpower. Right now, America is dominant there. We must make a documentary to ensure that people think that China is the next power when it comes to maritime trade. And this is Prabir Purkayastha, who is doing all of this communication, also speaking to former Navy officers on this. What does this really mean? Let me actually go across to the guests who are joining us now. Priyanka Tibrewal, spokesperson of the BJP in West Bengal. Ratan Sharada, author. Vivek Bansal, senior leader of the Congress. And Kevin Mathews, political analyst. Mr. Bansal, tell me, why would an Indian journalist make a documentary saying, you know, US has been powerful for very long, let's show how China should be the next maritime power?
Well, on the face of it, and coming and seeing to the evidence which is coming from the ED, I think malafide intentions can't be ruled out, and the fact that they have been receiving and being funded by China, it's a serious lapse on their part, or rather, I would say, that as far as their commitment to, as far as ethics of journalism goes, it's completely a gross violation of that, and thorough investigation needs to be done, except for the fact that somehow, definitely, we don't deny what the ED is saying, but...
Sir, what is your point? You are refusing to answer my question. Answer my question very simply. I'm asking you, what is an Indian journalist doing, making a documentary, communicating with Chinese people and saying that we will make a documentary saying that, oh, the next maritime power should be China? Why? If you want to have an Asian superpower, it should be India.
Except for the fact that lucre for money is the motive, and they are definitely betraying the interests of the country. Who are they to judge? In fact, and seeing to the fact that China happens to be our arch enemy at the moment.
Great. So you're saying, so you're accepting that NewsClick betrayed the interests of India?
Definitely, if one goes by the superficially or whatever the ED is alleging, I think definitely they are somehow betraying the interests of the country. It appears so.
Great. Then don't you think the Congress party should have done more due diligence while supporting NewsClick and attacking the government for carrying out searches? Today, when the ED is going to the Delhi High Court and saying that coercive action stay should be removed, you're like, oh, it looks like NewsClick has betrayed the interests of India. Then why did you defend them in 2021? This is exactly what the Indian government was saying at that time.
2021, all these details had not come.
So, sir, you should have waited for the ED investigation, no? Before calling it a witch hunt. This is very convenient. First you say Modi is a tyrant. Then 2 years later you're like, I didn't have all the details, so I thought Modi is a tyrant. But indeed, the man that he is raiding seems to be a criminal.
On this only, we would not say that Mr. Modi is a tyrant, or he is not a tyrant if the facts are otherwise.
Who
There
knows, sir?
are scores
Maybe
of
2 years
slew
from now,
of
the reason that you
activists.
have to call him a tyrant,
Please
that
listen.
will also be proven
No.
wrong.
I am not saying tyrant, but democratic institutions
You
are
called
being
him,
infringed
you
upon.
called him corrupt for
Impacted.
Rafale,
I can say
proven
that.
wrong. You called him tyrant for bringing in a law which, by the way, was about persecuted minorities. You were proven wrong. You tried to chipkaw some other things like some mythical tapping company. There also you were proven wrong. Now you went out and said, oh, poor NewsClick. 2 years later, you are like, but I am proven wrong.
Minority purging, what is happening in New? What is happening? They are without brazenly, their houses have been demolished
Of
without
course.
having any going
Sir,
by the
let the court investigate. Maybe
The
there
court
also you will be proven wrong. But anyway, I am still glad. I am still glad that you are acknowledging. You are acknowledging belatedly. You are acknowledging belatedly.
Case by case, we would go into it.
No, but the company is the same, no?
It's a sweeping statement that whatever had been done by the present government is completely.
Sir, I am not saying anything about. I am frankly, first of all, I am nobody to give a sweeping certificate of character or otherwise to anyone, least of all the government. I am just telling you very specifically that 2 years ago, the Enforcement Directorate searched this particular company. You said, what a wonderful company, what a paragon of journalism. Why is this tyrant Modi government cracking down on it? 2 years later, you are saying, seems to me that this company is a sellout. Maybe if you don't know the facts, silence is a virtue. Let me bring in Mr. SP Vaid, Ratan Sharada.
Silence is a virtue.
Silence sometimes could be a virtue. Mr. SP Vaid, Ratan Sharada and Priyanka Tibrewal. Mr. SP Vaid, I'll first ask you because you are one of the signatories of a letter that has now been written to the Prime Minister and to the President where you're saying that strict action should be taken. You yourself have been a very senior police officer. Many people looking from the outside would say, why do you want action against NewsClick? Don't you want free speech to proliferate in our country? Don't you want independent journalism to thrive in our country?
Padmaja, good afternoon. As far as your question is concerned, there is no doubt about free press in India, but you can't be funded by an enemy country like China and floating a particular narrative, false narrative in this country, that China's role about COVID-19, how to wash it off. Look at the way the email indicates what ED came across, how all these emails were parading this particular media house to float a particular false narrative in this country.
Tell me, sir. Tell me, sir, what do you make specifically of the emails that we have that now this company was going to make a documentary trying to project China as the great Asian maritime power?
See, the whole world knows what China is doing in the South China Sea, and as per international norm, there are limits for every country to have their particular maritime area, and that applies to everyone. It's not that China only has the whole sole rights on this particular area. That is they're trying to float a narrative in India, creating a pro-China viewpoint in this country, taking advantage of the free press in India, and you are trying to sabotage the democratic
trying to create a pro-China narrative, and maybe those are your leanings. Those may be the leanings of a certain publication. But Ratan Sharada, wouldn't this directly impact India's interests? Because if there is a fight for prominence in the Asian subcontinent, China and India are literally eyeball to eyeball. You are trying to give a leg up to China's standing.
Yeah, see, Padmaja, my issue is that you can be a lobbyist. So if you publish such material, I have no problem because you are a lobbyist, that's your job. Unfortunately, in India, lobbying firms are not allowed. You don't have lobbyists. So you end up showing yourself as independent journalist, so-called, and you lobby for China against the interests of India. When you talk of maritime power, who is the competition, as rightly pointed out? India. And if you see the behavior of China in South China Sea, we know all the countries around that region are being bullied by China. Who doesn't know about it? Right from Japan to smallest country, and Mr. Vaid rightly pointed out. And what is the main issue today? Main issue is Indian Ocean control, dominance. India has been dominating Indian Ocean since the name of Indian Ocean itself has been in the name of India. After that, China is trying to build bases, is trying to create its own sphere of influence, its own string of pearls. And if that is happening, then naturally no patriot Indian, nobody who believes in India would support China in this particular endeavor. And you call, and when Congress reacts, basically Congress reaction is always, reflex action is to oppose whatever BJP does. It
Very strange and very suspicious. But Priyanka Tibrewal, I want
Editors Guild.
Exactly. All those people must answer, who, by the way, are still standing by this publication. But Priyanka Tibrewal, we've also had this case in court now for a while. If you wear your hat of a lawyer, do you think this makes for a case of subverting Indian interests much more than just money laundering, for which right now NewsClick has been taken to court or has been raided?
Of course, Padmaja, it is. And see, whatever was the intention of NewsClick, that has been well understood by the people, and even the report of the ED, which was submitted in the court. There is immense evidence. That's the reason that they are asking for quashing of the protection order, which has been received by them. But another pertinent question here is that why did Congress, and why has Congress, continuously given them a platform to spread this kind of news, whether it was Rafale, whether it was the Adani's mining deal in Australia? Why were they so eager? Because, see, the interest, like yesterday it was said in the parliament that Congress defines corruption, Congress defines incompetency. And I would also say that Congress also defines anti-nationalism. There is nobody.
Very serious charge, Mr. Bansal.
Yes,
Priyanka Tibrewal is saying this is
I
not.
think this is another extreme, and they are habitual. They are habitual of using such extreme languages. On the contrary, we can also say so many. We can also cite that they are intentionalists or whatever they are disrupting the social fabric of this country.
When he travels abroad? What does he speak about his own country? Now, whatever is happening here, this is a proof of you being an anti-nationalist. Giving platforms to such media.
What does it speak of?
We should not forget this also, Padmaja, that there were mails with the relative of Vrinda Karat. Who was Vrinda Karat?
Interesting point. No, you're absolutely right. You are talking about Vijay Prashad, Kevin Mathews, because while the Congress may have defended, there is a more deep link with the CPM here. Because the promoter of a place called Tricontinental is a gentleman called Vijay Prashad. Vijay Prashad himself has said that he is the nephew of Brinda Karat. What is going on? What is this relationship? What is this nexus? Why are people trying to push? Fine, you unknowingly peddle Chinese propaganda, it's bad enough. But you are pushing Chinese interests while sitting in India. And you are linked to mainstream political parties.
Padmaja, true. And on that note, yes, it is unfortunate, and we are all Indians first, and that is there. But having said that,
no, sir, hold on. We are all Indians first is fine. But some people who are Indians on their passport, but are doing deeds which are anything but Indian. Let's be very clear of that. There is no comparison between people like us who are actually working for the interests of India and other people right now who are being exposed as working for China's interests.
See, and the problem here is until they are exposed, it is difficult for us to gauge, for anybody to gauge that. And also, on another note, what has happened in this country is ED and CBI has become the main hatchets of the government. So everybody, they have a problem.
ED and CBI is not making documentaries. ED and CBI is not writing emails. ED and CBI is certainly not saying that please send me 3 stories that we should write on the COVID handling of China, giving them a clean chit. ED and CBI is certainly not saying, let's make China the maritime power. Answer the question. Why are Indian citizens pretending to be journalists furthering China's interests.
I agree that there are bad apples, but But what happens is, so same way this NewsClick now turns out to be a bad this thing. So when ED and CBI tend to go behind anyone that doesn't stand in line with what the central government says, it is quite natural to assume
No, it's
that
not
other
natural.
people are victims.
It is not natural at all, sir. This is I'm sorry to say, but this is a pretty silly thing to say that, oh, you know, generally ED and CBI are acting against political adversaries of the BJP, so anyone they go after, I just assume that it's a witch hunt. Maybe your assumption is the problem, not the action of the ED CBI. Consider that. This, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, has just been the latest tranche. We are just putting the facts in front of you and asking some blunt questions. This is not about free speech. This is not about a witch hunt of any one organization. This is just about asking, why are you sitting in India and trying to further Chinese interests? If there's a logical answer to that, we are willing to hear. Thanks, gentlemen. Priyanka Tibrewal for joining me. I'll see you next at 8 p.m. on India Upfront, where we tell you in pinpointed detail how a certain publication took dictation from China and, believe it or not, executed it to the T. They were being told, write this, they wrote it. They said you must publish this, they published it. Written, published, propagated, all at China's bidding, the evidence at it.